This meeting will be webcast. Members are reminded of the need to activate their microphones before speaking. I would like to remind everyone present that the meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewings or another use by such third parties. If you are seated in the public seating area, it's likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should speak to the webcasting officer. I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting, Plan South, this evening, and welcome to my Vice Chair, Sherry Rahman, who is standing in for Councillor Williamson, who unfortunately has had an operation. I'm sure you'll join me in wishing him well. I'd like to welcome our officers, Graham Courtney, Rebecca Perrin over here, and those who are helping this, the webcast to take place. I'd like to remind speakers that you have 3 minutes to speak on the applications listed here, and general advice for people attending the meeting are attached to the document. Item 3 minutes. Just one moment, Councillor Sangha. I'd also like to announce that I'm going to be a voting chairman this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman. Just want to highlight that the meeting that was held on the 8th of September, I did tender my apology. That's not been recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have, can we say that we're happy with the minutes? Agreed. Item 4, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Lyon, Councillor Neville and Councillor Williamson.
And Councillor Roberts.
Councillor Roberts, thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest. Okay. Councillor Heath.
Thank you. In relation to item 12, I had several emails with the applicant. It's certainly a non-pecuniary interest, and I've even had a meeting with some of the officers with you, Chairman, about it. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to vote, but I will stay and possibly speak.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, I probably should declare an interest in item 9, which is AFP stroke 1182 stroke 18. That's the land west of Frognall Lane, Chigwell. Chigwell Cemetery is mentioned several times in the report, and I do have a family plot there, so I feel probably should make that declaration.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Declare a non-pecuniary, non-prejudicial interest in item 12, because I've also spoken to the applicant, but I will stay and vote.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sangha.
Yeah, I also like to declare non-prejudicial interest. Item number 10, I've had a chat, I had some clarification with Graham Courtney of the application. Just some clarification.
Sorry, could you...
I've had some clarification of the item number 10 with Mr. Courtney.
Right, okay, thank you.
Non-prejudicial.
Okay. Pranav, Councillor.
It's a non-pecuniary interest, but I live in very, very close proximity to 177 High Road, so that's item number 10.
Thank you. Any other business?
There is none, Chairman.
Epping Forest, item 7, Epping Forest local plan submission version, planning brief policy briefing note. Can I ask our officer, Graham Courtney?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just as a point of for members, some may recall that at the previous South Committee there was an item raised, there was some comments made on this item from Councillor Pond about updating the local plan briefing note. That has been done by my colleagues in policy. That has been provided. Unfortunately, it was only provided yesterday, so it isn't on this agenda, but I can assure you it will be on future agendas, and we can provide copies if anyone wishes to see it before the agendas are published.
So I'd just like to mention item 8, site visits, to identify and agree requirements for formal site visits to be held with regard to any planning application listed in this agenda prior to consideration of that application. So may I ask if anyone's going to call for any site visits? So I assume that's no. Right, we can go on to our first planning application, EFP/1182/18, land west of Frognall Lane, Chigwell, Essex. Right, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Item 9 on this evening's agenda involves a hybrid planning application comprising as follows. Part 1 is for full planning permission for 105 assisted living units. 2, integrated care facilities comprising a wellness centre and restaurant. And 3, landscape and associated infrastructure and services. Part 2 of the application is for a full outline planning permission for the extension of the existing Chigwell Cemetery. Members shall note that consideration for this aspect only considers the principal, and therefore all other matters, such as access, design and layout, will be dealt with under a subsequent reserved matters application. Moving on, the application site encompasses a total site area of 2.8 hectares of land, of which 0.45 hectares is for the cemetery, the site comprising the cemetery land. And it's located between, the actual application site is located between Chigwell Cemetery to the north, which is here, and the recent new residential development to the south called Woodlands Road. The site has two separate access points. First, from Woodlands Road. It's not quite so obvious there, but it will be in later slides. And also from the west off of Mount Pleasant Road, which will be here. In terms of site topography, the site levels fall by 9 metres from west to east boundaries. So when we say west to east, that's the direction, so the land falls away towards the east. The actual other images here also represent internal photos or landscape photos from various points from within the site itself. Members should note that the site is currently identified in the LPSV, that's a submission version local plan, for development to provide 105 specialist dwellings. This is the relevant allocation within the submission version local plan. Notwithstanding, however, the Office of Assessment still gives significant material weight to the fact that the site is currently designated Metropolitan Greenbelt, and accordingly, the stringent application of the policy tests in this respect have been applied. Turning to the physical layout and design aspects of the scheme, the proposals are arranged within a cluster of 5 blocks, A, B, C, D, E, as you see here, all of which are 4/5 stories in height and constructed in a traditional, or proposed to be constructed in a traditional village vernacular. In terms of the unit types, the proposals comprise a total of 87 2-bed units and 18 1-bed units. 58, and of the smallest, which will be at 58 square metres, those are for the one beds, ranging up to a maximum of 125 square metres for the largest, which are the two beds. This slide obviously just sets out effectively the accommodation types and general mixes. These are some of the images where I've obviously described just a moment ago by, you know, fortunately it is just a 2D drawing, but gives you an impression of obviously some of the units here. These are sections through the site from Mount Pleasant Road to Woodland Road and vice versa. Development proposals provide large landscaped areas. So I'll move to that. Large landscaped areas for formal and informal spaces with car parking integrated to the periphery of the site boundaries. Along here. The main access for future occupiers is intended from Woodlands Road, which is along here, with a secondary side access provided off Mount Pleasant Road. It will be a gated access for emergency vehicles. The nature of the residential accommodation demands a need for communal welfare and care facilities accordingly. Accordingly, the proposals incorporate a restaurant and gym and spa. So these facilities are located respectively in blocks A and C. So if I just scroll back to some of the units before, so I can show you where they are. So it's within these two blocks here. This is where the wellness and facility and the dining areas, these are the communal facilities for residents. Officers have recommended the application for conditional approval subject to section 106 to secure planning benefits as follows. This is for 1.7 million towards affordable housing, off-site housing provision, 52,500 towards a hopper bus scheme, £24,009 towards primary healthcare facilities or services in the local area, and £35,175 towards measures identified in the interim air pollution mitigation strategy to obviously offset the impacts on the Epping Forest Special Area Conservation. Further obligations are recommended by officers to secure the restrictions on residential occupation to residents of only 60 years of age, and further restriction on the use of the recreational leisure facilities just described for residents and their guests. Just scroll along just to give you some kind of visual images of, these are just artist impressions of the actual development. So this is a view from within the development along the Cornwall Terrace areas. Just giving a general impression of what the development will appear as. Should members be minded to approve the planning proposals this evening, the case itself will be subject to a referral to the National Planning Case Unit under direction. And this is also covered at the end of the planning report itself. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a speaker. We have two speakers on this application. Councillor Jeffcoat, and to remind you, you have three minutes.
Can you put your microphone on? Oh, I'm pressing the button. Oh. No, just press it once. That's it. Can I just say before I start, although I am Councillor Jeffcoat, as you rightly said, Chigwell Parish Council did not comment on this, so I am not speaking this evening as Councillor Jeffcoat. The reason that Chigwell Parish did not comment on this is because there was a pecuniary interest, because the parish are to receive the cemetery land, which obviously will provide an income, and also contributions were provided for an S106, which is a pecuniary interest, so the parish did not comment on this. So I am commenting this evening as Mrs Jeffcoat representing the Chigwell residents.
Thank you.
I'll start. Everything about this proposal is sadly out of date. The NHS contribution based on surgery numbers in neighbouring Redbridge from 2018, the wildlife and ecological assessments for 2016, the S106s offering payments for service that no longer exist in Chigwell. The parking, cutting the number of parking spaces won't cut car ownership, it will simply increase parking on surrounding streets by staff, residents and visitors. And the affordable housing. There seems to have been some horse trading on this and an off-site contribution of 1.7 million has been agreed. But where is the transparency? KIFT, the councillors, independent advisors, described the developer's viability statement as flawed, but planners have made decisions based on it. It's not been published. Councillors haven't seen it, the public haven't seen it, and the information on why contributions have been agreed of almost £1 million less than the bare minimum figure KIFT calculated aren't available. Woodland Way was pointed out, the new development that went up a few years ago. That was also on Greenbelt, as is this. That was conditional on that 80% of that was affordable housing, which is how it was built. There doesn't seem to be anything approaching that sort of contribution here. And of course the affordable housing is very out of date, as is everything else. Policy H12 of the submission version of the local plan says in exceptional circumstances the council will accept a financial contribution to fund the provision of affordable housing on another site, providing that the council is satisfied that the contribution is at least equivalent to the increased development value of the site. Again, with no affordable housing, with no viability statement, we can't see that. And that a financial and viability appraisal has been provided with supporting evidence, which is transparent and complies with relevant national and local guidance at the time. The viability statement hasn't been published or provided, and again, it's going to be out of date. The Volvo garage was deferred to publish the viability statement and reconsult, and so should this be, particularly given the fact that this is Greenbelt land. This is a significant impact on it. We really need to be looking very carefully at this. And the viability statement, along with all the other reports, should be up to date. Again, how can planners recommend and councillors make decisions based on outdated information? Really, this application should be refused and a new application with up-to-date information be submitted along with the current viability assessments and a transparent report of how the affordable housing contribution that will compensate for this loss of Greenbelt is calculated and agreed. At the very least, new reports should be provided to councillors so they have the best and most accurate information available to them to properly make their decision. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another speaker, Jamie Sullivan, please.
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me okay? You can. Good stuff. Well, thank you very much, Chair, and good evening to everyone. I'm Jamie Sullivan, the planning agent for this scheme. I don't intend to say too much today. Your officers have produced a very good report that covers the key issues well, and we agree with the recommendation for approval. There are, however, a few matters that I would like to draw to members' attention around a few key themes. First of all, this proposal is for extra care housing, which would meet an identified need within the district. In Epping Forest, nearly a third of the population growth over the planned period comes from the 80+ age group. To address these changes to the demographic structure of Epping Forest population, we need to provide positive choices for those who are looking to move into more appropriate accommodation with an element of care, such as this proposal. Our own assessment shows a need for 254 new units of this type in the district. That is the current position. This need will only grow as the population ages further. This is the only site in the local plan allocated for this purpose. It is therefore essential that this scheme is brought forward to offer meaningful choices to local residents. Second, this site was originally identified in the Chigwell neighbourhood plan by the Chigwell Parish Council before the allocation elements were merged within the local plan. It provides a 1 acre extension to Chigwell Cemetery and offers a unique opportunity to secure the long-term burial needs of the community. This allocation has been assessed by the local plan inspector, and while other sites were removed from the local plan, there were no concerns raised over this allocation, and the site should therefore be considered acceptable in planning terms. Third, we are all well aware of the issues around ensuring new development avoids a detrimental impact on the Epping Forest SAC. Our scheme would deliver the various requirements of the interim mitigation strategy approved by the council. Finally, given the recent hiatus in approving residential planning applications, there will be an inevitable drop-off in terms of delivery of new homes for the people of Epping Forest and a knock-on impact for the construction sector. This developer is eager to start work quickly on this scheme, and it can be delivered in a one phase, meaning a significant early contribution to housing delivery and providing jobs for the local construction sector. In addition, the sale of these units will free up existing family homes as the current occupiers downsize, providing a double boost to the housing market. Once open, the scheme will also provide 20 permanent new jobs within this high quality new development. I'd also add in terms of those points that were made there in terms of reports being out of date, that the application and all of its reports have been assessed to make sure that they're deemed appropriate still, and that's the view of officers and the various consultants, that those reports are still deemed up to date. And that's all I had, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you very much, Chair. Having listened to both sides here, I feel that how can they be deemed still in date when clearly we don't have the hopper bus? So that's the first thing, that it's definitely out of date when we don't have that. So how are they going to contribute to something that we actually don't actually have in place anymore? Secondly, he's saying that there's an identified need. I haven't seen any evidence that's been produced that there's an identified need, so I'd actually like to know where they've actually got that evidence from. Because, as I said, I have not seen any evidence to say that we need that many homes for residents in our area. The viability statement I'd like to have a look at, so I'm asking, please, if we can put this to one side, this planning application, so that we can actually have a look at the viability statement, because we've not been able to actually view that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Chair. I do feel that there is a need and a provision for extra care housing going forward. I have got some concerns because this is in my ward. Firstly, I wanted to know how much the contribution, how many affordable homes will be provided for this contribution. My other concerns are about parking and about how the residents will feel about all these extra cars that will obviously be on their roads, because I feel that 65 spaces for 105 units is probably not enough, and then we have 20 for 20 staff members. That really doesn't make it very easy for people coming to visit, and any extra care facilities that may be needed to come on site. So I have got concerns on those issues, and I wondered whether the officer could perhaps give us some hindsight on that. And I'm also quite interested in the contribution to the bus. Does that mean that the bus will actually be on site for people to be taken to various locations, or will it just be, just a contribution for the bus? So if I could have some responses on that, please, I'd be very grateful. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I was expecting the case officer to come in. I'm not sure if he's... Oh, there you go.
Here.
He's coming on. Here we go.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hello, hi. Okay, I shall deal with the issue regarding the evidence of need for the specialist accommodation being provided. This has been tested through the emerging local plan process. And just to really update members, the fact that through the local hearings, there were no fundamental objections for, i.e., retaining the actual allocation in that local plan. So, in effect, trying to support the justification of the need, that has all been considered you know, through, as I say, through by the inspector, and there are no fundamental objections for it being retained or within the local plan. That's that first point. Sorry. Does that clarify the issue of need? I'll move on to the second point regarding the hopper bus contribution, and you know, in relation to whether that contribution is still required. It is really down to members whether they feel that that contribution is necessary. You know, if they feel that that contribution could be diverted to another requirement, that would need obviously to be justified in terms of the SIL regulations, but obviously that can be considered post planning, i.e. during Section 106 negotiations with the applicant. But that money is still there, and as the planning agent has stated, that the package of benefits are still on the table for members to consider, and they haven't sought to withdraw those. And obviously, in terms of the affordable housing contribution itself, in terms of how many units the contribution would provide, it's my I've been advised that that would deliver up to 18 units off site. That's what we're talking. That's the equivalent to 18 odd units itself. And in terms of the parking provision, you know, we have obviously reviewed the original quantum of parking that was being proposed by the applicant, and you know, following negotiation discussions, felt that, you know, a more should we say balanced provision would be justified given the location close to public transport connections, and also equally the issues surrounding you know, trying to obviously mitigate the effects on the Epic Forest Special Area of Conservation. You know, I mean, again, parking itself is a concern. Officers have acknowledged that. We have discussed these matters with also equally Essex County Council from a road safety point of view, and we've considered that, you know, on balance, the provision itself would be, you know, policy compliant, and there wouldn't be a requirement to ask for more. But however, you know, members themselves are free to request additional parking should they see, you know, that is a measure which could prevent the potential for additional parking in surrounding roads. Just also, I need to make a point on this, that any kind of parking within Woodlands Road would be resisted. I mean, simply because we do have controls along there now that prevents any kind of on-street parking. Of course, that could obviously put pressure in terms of on other surrounding roads, but we feel that, you know, there is sufficient capacity within the area, and don't honestly consider that, you know, from a technical point of view, that there would be additional parking within the surrounding roads, which would obviously then compromise, you know, the road safety aspect, etc., and, you know, creating additional congestion and the so-called, you know, concerns amongst local residents in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had an application like this previously in Loughton where it was where the use class wasn't defined, and between C2 and C3, and came forward as sui generis as this has, and this adds a lot of confusion actually when trying to determine the affordable housing contribution. On that occasion, we had there was a report that was produced for councillors to look at the viability of the scheme, because we felt on that occasion that the viability didn't match up to what was being suggested. Have we done that on this occasion? Have we had our own internal evaluation of the figures that are being proposed? just going back to the use categories again, looking at C2 and C3, I think it is important that we determine what class this type of development is, because one development lends itself to the need for additional more parking than what's being stated. I don't believe that there is sufficient parking on site. Looking at in the report, it's stated that this complex, the assisted living complex, is going to be for those over the age of 60. Now, the driving age is over 70. Oh, sorry, the driving age until you have to renew your driving license is much higher. So there is going to be a need for these for each of these dwellings to have a car, in my opinion. And I believe that we're massively short of car parking on this development. But put in another way, that if there is carer support to be had, and I'm presuming that there will be packages of care that be associated with the different complexities of care needs, that will result in in carer support. Now that carer support will have to commute in or drive to site. What evaluation have we got that that provision is sufficient as well in terms of its car parking? And we also have auxiliary use on site as well, with a restaurant being provided. Is that just for residents of this complex, or is it going to be for additional use? Just go back to a comment that's been picked up by the objector about up-to-date information. We haven't had a comment back on that, and if we are evaluating a proposal based on old data, old information, it does need to be updated in order for us to get to make a proper judgment on the application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you wanted anyone to come back. I don't know if Juma may have something to say. I'll take I think I'll take the last point first, because actually it's probably quite relevant to the rest of the discussion. In that this is a historic case. I'm sure members are all aware of that. This is a case that's been on our SAC held in abeyance list for some time. Obviously, it's an allocated site. So it's quite near the top of those cases where we are now trying to get decisions issued on those. There obviously there is a priority of the council to get those issued. There has been some discussion internally around whether we should seek further updated reports and assessments. But as I say, there is kind of a priority at the moment to get these cases out. Obviously, the original viability appraisal was assessed independently by KIFT, who I don't think we use anymore, but obviously they are an independent consultant. They looked at it. They may have raised some concerns, but they were content with the offer. There's been discussions with our affordable housing officer who are here on Zoom. So again, if there's any questions, you can put those directly to the affordable housing officers. But there's been discussions with them. It's still considered to be an acceptable offer for this scheme. So it was considered, appropriate to bring it forward as it is, rather than causing further delays. On this SAC case, as I say, there is a real priority to bring it forward. Obviously, there are some concerns around the viability appraisals and the date of those. We could have them updated. Obviously, we don't know what that may bring about. It may result in higher contributions. It may result in lower contributions. Obviously, we don't know what that may come at, but it may come back exactly the same as it is at the moment. And as I say, a decision was made that we didn't feel we should be causing further delays, given the priorities of the council to bring this site forward. But obviously, if that is something that members are concerned about, certainly that's something we could look into. I think that probably answers your other question about the reports. As I say, they were. And yeah, the sui generis, obviously, again, as mentioned in the presentation, this is an allocated site, and actually it's the only allocated site within the new local plan for specialist accommodation. It is specifically allocated for this use, this type of use. Obviously, the application that's been submitted is the use that we've, or is considered to be the same use has been assessed and has been put forward in the local plan for allocation. It's exactly the same numbers, 105 specialist homes, so they are following the allocation in terms of the submission. So I'm pretty certain I know the scheme you're talking about or referred to in Loughton, and that was a little bit more complicated because that wasn't the same as what was allocated, but I think it's slightly clearer here in that they are following the allocation.
Thank you. You want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. I think on the basis of what we've heard, I appreciate that you know, we are trying to pass applications that have been held up by the process, but I am minded to ask that we get updated information before we make a judgment on this application, and whether that be via a deferral until we get that information. I'll be guided by you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Sangha.
Chairman, thank you very much. I think the objector raises a very important point that if, as a committee, we are going to be deciding on an application that is set in front of us, we need information that is up to date and accurate. In the absence of that, especially the fact that the viability appraisal report hasn't been published, my question would be to Mr. Courtney, can you confirm whether that's a legal requirement for the viability assessment report to be published? And if I can come back, Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. You're going to push my my planning legal knowledge here. I'm not a planning lawyer, so please don't take what I say as gospel. But no, as far as I'm aware, it's not a legal requirement to publish viability appraisals. Obviously, the guidance does say we should be transparent, and certainly that's a big discussion we had with regards to this item when we previously discussed that particular case. And I think I said then, and I say now that I actually agree. I think they should be transparent. They should be made available. Again, slightly goes back to the fact that this is a historic case. You know, this came in, I'm not actually sure the date it came in, but it would have been sometime in 2018. I think it was going to be presented to committee in 2019. Obviously, back then, certainly we were slightly more hesitant about publishing viability appraisals. There's obviously always some concern around commercial confidentiality and things like that. But certainly, I don't know if there's a motion, but I know there's been a request from Councillor Patel to have some updated information, and personally I think if we do have that, if that is carried forward, I think that probably should be published much the same as we've done on the next item and should be made available. But no, I don't believe it's a legal requirement, but it certainly is strongly encouraged.
Thank you. Chairman, if I may
come back?
May I come back? Thank you. I think, Mr. Courtney, you're absolutely right, and I think the spirit of transparency, like with the next item we're going to be dealing with, I would like to propose to the committee that we defer this item until we got all the information, true and actual facts. I'll leave it to the committee if they would like to support that proposal. Defer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Rizvi.
Thank you, Chairman. So I was just going to echo exactly the same, which I think the outdated nature of the proposal and the lack of a viability report means it's nigh on impossible to make a decision tonight. So I would just echo what Councillor Sangha has said.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just on the affordable housing. I mean, we're 600k short. The officers say that it's going to be viable at the full contribution. I think it's time for the council to play hardball and not accept a penny less.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow. You wanted to come back.
Thank you. And also regarding the affordable housing, they're saying it's about 18 units, and it says it's off-site. When they're saying it's off-site, does that mean to say that we're going to get the money that's ploughed back into Chigwell, or it'll be ploughed back into Epping Forest as a district as well?
Officer Juma.
In respect to that, the expectation would be that the monies would be secured for provision for the across the district rather than the actual any specific local area.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to come back?
Yes, please, yes. Because what I'm finding is that every time we're having some kind of planning application and we secure an S106, we get nothing in Chigwell. It's always ploughed back into Epping Forest as a district. You know, we need affordable housing in Chigwell. And I think it's time that, you know, we start to gain something back for these developments in Chigwell.
Thank you. Councillor Pond, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got no objection to the extension to the cemetery, which is therefore the outline application. I think we could grant that. However, I do have several matters of principle, some of which have been already addressed by my colleagues from Chigwell, but there are one or two additional ones. The matter of principle is, have the very special circumstances necessary to release this land from the Metropolitan Greenbelt been satisfactorily discharged? My view is that they have not. I do not think the provision of elderly care is a very special matter, sufficient to remove the land from its current encumbrance. And of course, when I say encumbrance, the Greenbelt has a very special purpose. And if you travel on the loop line between Gants Hill, Newbury Park and Woodford, you will see that the separation of communities is a very prime purpose of this part of the Greenbelt. As you go through the Grangehill Tunnel, you enter the countryside. And I think removal of this bit of land would be deleterious. Secondly, on the question of currency, I do not see how we can take a decision tonight based on out-of-date information, which is known to be out of date, and simply getting it through quickly, as Graham Courtney has said, is not, in my view, a good reason for making a decision, because that decision might well be regarded by the courts and others as vitiated. So I do agree with the Chairman of Chigwell Parish Council about that. There are also one or two matters of detail. In recent days, Essex County Council has issued the Essex County Council Walking Strategy. And the walking strategy requires the provision of direct walking facilities to and from transport hubs, including Grangehill Station, rather than having to go around Dog's Leg. So I think if, as I assume, we will agree to defer this application, we should ask for the provision of a direct walking route to the station. If the level of motor car parking provision is as is suggested, people will need to use the underground station and need to be able to get there expeditiously. The last matter of detail I wanted to raise was condition 15, which is on page 19, which is for the protection of transport for London. And that condition is, in my view, extremely badly worded. It may be that the officers, when they drafted it, were unaware of the serious incident which took place in Shoreditch not so long ago, when works interfered with the underground railway because insufficient information had been contained in the consent. So the condition number 15 needs to involve Transport for London directly. They need to sign off any works done in the vicinity of the railway. And when you say our railway, Epping Forest, not to my knowledge, does not run any railways, although it might be a good thing if it did. So I think that condition needs rewording. And I will say, just in concluding, I don't have any qualms relative to the special area of conservation, because this is quite a long way from the special area of conservation. Extra journeys through it by car are likely to be fairly small. But the one thing I would like to know is, were Redbridge, London Borough, involved on an adjacent area a consultee basis, because the boundary, as you know, is just across the road from this site. If they weren't, I think during the interregnum caused by what I'm sure will be the deferral, they, I believe, ought to be consulted. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. On the affordable housing thing, it was 1.7 million and the officer said there were 18 units. So that's about £94,000 a unit at £2,000 a metre. That's 47 square metres, which is 10 above the bare minimum. So that's a block of flats somewhere else. So does there exist a plot of land for a block of flats for 18 years? And the other thing is, it says that residents have, it's been identified that this is a needed thing. So what is the residential criteria to make sure it's only for Chigwell residents?
Officer Courtney.
Sorry, I was just looking, actually, my apologies, Councillor Heap. I caught the first part. What was the second part of your question? My apologies.
What is the residency criteria to make sure this is only used by local needs?
I don't believe, again, Juma may wish to come in, I don't believe there's a condition about it being local, for local needs. It is obviously, we are suggesting a condition around the occupancy of the premises, obviously in terms of the age profile, as it is specialist accommodation, but we wouldn't be suggesting that there's a restriction in terms of where they come from. That does prove to be quite difficult. I mean, I know we have had similar clauses before on affordable housing, where there's almost first dibs to our local housing list, things like that. But that obviously wouldn't really work as in this type of specialist accommodation. So I'm not sure we could control that, in all honesty. So there isn't a restriction on that, unless Juma wants to come in and correct me there.
There isn't a restriction to ensure that obviously it meets a very specific local need, no.
So it's not worth mentioning that it's a local need, because it's open to everybody in the UK.
Yeah, but it's about demonstrating that there's a local need, isn't there? It's a slightly different assessment there. I mean, I suppose it's similar to the housing need. I mean, there's a housing need survey for Epping Forest district in terms of how many houses we need in a district, but there's nothing stopping anybody buying those houses. It's, you look at the need of the area and specifically, and it's more than likely that, if there is a local need, then local people will take those up. But no, there's no way to restrict that. But as I say, it's about the assessment of the need rather than ensuring that is there's a restriction there. Just quickly, while I'm on, I just wanted to come back because I wasn't sure if Councillor Pond actually wanted any comments back on some of the things that he mentioned there, but I didn't know if it was worth just quickly coming back on some of those.
If there are any points on which a clear answer could give them, yes, give them now. Otherwise, I suggest, because I've heard a motion to defer from the front row, and that passes, they could be attended to in the interregnum.
Well, I will just come back just because there may be some points for us to just note down. The last point you made was about Redbridge. I'm just having a little look. It doesn't appear that Redbridge have been consulted. I will check that fully, and if they haven't, then we can certainly, if we are deferring the item, can ensure that they are consulted. Condition 15, I've had a look at, and actually the wording of that condition is as suggested by London Underground. We're happy to relook at the wording, but obviously if they're the ones who've suggested it, that's kind of what we would tend to go with. But I think that's probably the main point I want to come back on.
Yes, on that latter point, Madam Chairman, there are references to our railway, so if they are reporting a request from Transport for London, it should say so.
Also, the formatting actually is pretty poor and needs to be redone as well, but that's, yeah, and we can certainly look at that.
Councillor Jennings, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, if members are minded to defer this item to a later date, the objector did raise it, I noticed it. and I think we need to remove £52,500 contribution for basically a bus service that doesn't exist anymore, and it should be replaced with something which is a bit more appropriate to the area. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to come back?
On that point, Chairman, Grange Hill Station is not DDA compliant. It is not level access. So any transport monies that were sloshing around and can no longer be used, I would suggest be put towards making Grange Hill Station accessible to the people who are receiving the extra care in the proposed development.
Thank you. Given I'm just considering deferring this planning application, and would members support that?
Yes.
Right, can I have a proposer, please? Yes, quickly.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I'm just picking up on something that the objector said, that the parish council did not declare pecuniary interest, and there's a comment on page 29 which from the original consultation response. Is that from the previous application, or is this from this application? The reason I'm asking that question is because if the parish council are there to represent their residents, and if they felt that they were unable to comment on an application because of pecuniary interest, I believe that they should seek dispensation to be able to voice the residents' opinion, and in so doing, seek correct Section 106 monies that go back to the parish.
Thank you.
I can come back on that one if the councillor so requires. Just to clarify that the parish council itself was reconsulted on this application, but determined that it obviously wouldn't wish to comment. So the reported or the published comments in the report are or remain their stated view on the application, as far as we're aware at this stage.
Okay. So, you can come back quickly, Councillor Sangha.
Chairman, I think Councillor Patel raises a very important point here, that if we are going to have transparency, Chigwell Parish Council made a decision based on the information they had at that time. New information has come to light. I think it's only fair they have an opportunity to revisit the application.
Yes.
I don't know how we're going to do that, but certainly today.
Can I have a proposer for deferring this? Seconder? Yes, Councillor.
Who's proposing? Councillor Barlow, actually.
She put her hand up.
Put her hand up first to propose. Sorry?
Sorry, it's Barlow then, Sangha.
Yeah, Councillor Barlow and Councillor.
So this application is deferred until we gather further information.
Chairman, you just need to vote. They just need to vote on that.
So, yes, would you, Councillor Perrin, Officer Perrin, would you organise that, please?
Who's in favour for deferral?
Do we need to?
Yeah, unanimous.
Yes, Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Chairman, thank you for coming back. I think my colleagues here were wondering if the deferral will come back with the publication of the viability appraisal report being published together with items that colleagues have raised tonight.
So viability report.
The viability, yes, that was
published.
mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Right, on to our next planning application. Oh, sorry. Officer Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I would say is that we can't just publish these documents. Obviously, members are subject to the same data protection and other regulations that council officers are, so there's no problem with members seeing the documents. We will have to take legal advice just on whether it's possible to publish the documents in their unedited format. We will also have to check with the applicant because, like Graham Courtney said earlier, there may be some financial and other information in there. We are looking at a framework for making sure that there is more transparency in publishing the viability statements with all the other application documents, but I suspect that will have to be done through our statement of community involvement. So we're working on that, and it's due for an update, I think, in the next few months. So we'll do that. So we, as a first step, we can definitely send out the viability documents out to members, and hopefully they can make sense of what's in there. And if possible at all, we will publish them as well. But like I say, we'll have to consult with the legal team and also with the applicant on that.
Thank you. Planning application EFP/2868/20 177 High Road, Chigwell, pages 45 to 62.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for 177 High Road, Chigwell. Members may recall this application, which has already been discussed in some depth at a previous South Committee and was subsequently deferred to allow for the viability appraisal work to be published and consulted on, which has been done, and to see whether the Council's viability consultant and urban design officer can attend this meeting, which they both have via Zoom. They will be available to answer any questions that members may have, as well as the Council's housing officers, who are also with us tonight. The application was previously recommended and continues to be recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. I will just quickly, before we go on to the slides, I will just add here that there are some minor amendments required to the suggested conditions as laid out in the agenda. These are with regards to condition 2, which needs to be updated slightly with the most up-to-date planning reference numbers. Condition 18, the applicant has now confirmed that gas boilers will not be used on the scheme, so this condition should be amended to require an alternative system be submitted for approval. And condition 31 is a repeat of condition 7, so should be deleted. So since there has already been a presentation and significant discussion on this proposal, I'm not going to go into detail regarding the scheme. Instead, I'll run through the slides to refresh the Council's memories of the application and focus on the 2 issues that the application was deferred for. So this here is the existing site plan. This shows the proposed site plan. Just as a refresher, the application proposes 35 residential units with 512 square metres of commercial floor space at ground floor level. The site is presently a car dealership that's situated within Chigwell High Road, very close to Chigwell Station, which is just down here. This is just the existing site, plans of the existing site, as is this. So the application proposes 29 parking spaces, which is 0.83 spaces per unit. There's also a new service loading bay proposed in Brook Mews, just here. The ground floor plan here shows the commercial units that would front onto the high road, and there's some residential units here. These is the upper floors. These are all the residential units. I'll just quickly flick through these. This is the small unit to the rear that members may recall we discussed, which is known as Block B. So as I say, the Urban Design Officer is available tonight to answer any questions, and her latest comments are also available on the Council's website, and I understand have been circulated to all members ahead of the meeting. So the applicants have worked closely with the Urban Design Officer and made amendments based on the comments received. The Urban Design Officer is still broadly supportive of the scheme. These are just some elevations for the small block B. So the other reason that the application was previously deferred was to enable the viability appraisal work to be published and for the Council's viability consultant to attend here tonight and answer any questions. As previously discussed, the submitted viability appraisal shows the scheme cannot viably provide the required 40% affordable housing, which has been confirmed by the Council's own independent consultant. Nonetheless, the applicant is willing to provide a £600,000 financial contribution towards off-site affordable housing provision. Here's some photos of the sites right now. So following the previous deferral, there have been some further discussions that have taken place with the applicant, and they are now offering an alternative to the £600,000 contribution in the form of free on-site shared ownership flats as affordable units. These would be two two-bed units and one one-bed unit. It should be noted that the alternative offer has not yet been accepted by housing officers, and there would need to be discussion around clauses in the legal agreement. However, the offer is on the table for members to consider. As previously put to members, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. We have discussed it in quite a lot of depth previously, but I'll go back to members for any questions for me or for any of the specialists we have on with us tonight.
We have a speaker, Councillor Jeff Coach, please, from Chigwell Parish Council.
Thank you. The Parish Council strongly object to this proposal. The Urban Design Officer has ticked the box saying he's still unable to support it, and it still fails to meet Epping Forest policy of 40% affordable housing or anything close. The viability statement shows a raft of overinflated costs, and the Council's own independent assessors have questioned this over and over. Instead, cherry-picked quotes are before us tonight, taken out of context and not reflecting their findings as a whole. The parking and commercial space remains questionable. Residents would like a food retailer in Chigwell, the nearest supermarket's over 3 kilometres away, but with no designated customer parking and very little delivery area, who would want it? There's no doctors in Chigwell, but what surgery has no parking? The developer says there are sustainable transport alternatives, but there aren't, and the developer isn't making any contribution to that. The one bus and shuttle service won't get people to work in Cheshunt or Harlow or Barnet. And the biggest missing contribution still affordable housing. The only affordable housing we have in Chigwell are 16 units in Woodland Way, as we spoke about earlier. We know that Hertfordshire granted permission on undeveloped Greenbelt on housing need alone. Our Greenbelt in Epping, not just Chigwell, is vulnerable to speculation, even more so with an identified lack of affordable housing. Epping Forest policy is clear that it's essential that new developments include it. Planning policy guidance and the National Planning Policy Framework have procedure on how viability should be calculated. It should be done using nationally approved and constantly updated figures for build cost. This developer hasn't followed those rules, instead throwing in their own extravagant prices throughout. And our planners haven't insisted they follow those rules. The Council's own independent advisors have said that if they did follow the rules, there'd be another £4 million profit in the pot, probably more given economies of scale. So why is no one listening to that? Is it because of the backlog of applications that we're rushing through, or a claimed concern for public spending? Our councillors will worry, I'm sure, about the legal costs of any hypothetical appeal, ignoring that this application has solid grounds for refusal because it doesn't comply with either national or local planning policy. Councillors need to listen to their residents. We'd have liked to see the same concerns for public money before £250,000 was spent on buses used by a handful of school children, or £100,000 on a national plan, a neighbourhood plan that fell at the first hurdle of the inspector. Don't let clearing a backlog or other interests lead you to a decision. We know this site will be developed, but it can be so much better than this. Remember policy and decide on it. Look at this viability statement, the ridiculous costs. Ask yourself if Chigwell Village needs what Councillors Pond described as a cliff face with no positives and only negatives for Chigwell residents. We hope that councillors are not pushed into the wrong decision. It would be wrong for this council, wrong for Chigwell, and wrong for all of Epping Forest.
Thank you. We have another, Barry Murphy, please. That's the applicant's agent. The same 177 High Road.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the committee for giving us the opportunity to respond to the concerns you raised in July. Affordable housing. The Council's policy sets a target of 40% of homes on site, but it's subject to viability testing. The Council's independent viability consultants have confirmed it's not viable to provide on-site affordable housing on this site, which is in accordance with policy. The viability reports and assessments have been fully published in an open book, fully transparent way for public scrutiny. All costs, including bathroom fit-outs, have also been independently assessed on behalf of the Council by Jeffrey Barnett Associates Chartered Quantity Surveyors. During subsequent negotiations with the Council's planning and housing teams, the applicant agreed to offer an ex gratia without prejudice financial contribution of £600,000 towards affordable housing in the district. Following our meeting in July, as Graham has mentioned, we have listened to your concerns, and we are now also offering an alternative ex gratia without prejudice offer of 3 on-site shared ownership affordable flats to help local people get on the property ladder. Urban design. As you are aware, we have worked closely with your urban design officer and made significant changes to the scheme over the last year and a half. Our most recent comments dated the 21st September confirmed that the completion of the block next to the Cube is positive with high quality elevations and will contribute positively to the public realm. There remains one minor subjective issue regarding the top floor setback, but on balance the development is supported, and this is confirmed by your officer's recommendation for approval. Sustainability and parking. Building A exceeds current building regs, and Building B goes over and above current policy and will be the first almost zero building in Epping. The level of parking proposed is also in accordance with policy and confirmed as acceptable by both Essex and Epping. We are all aware that due to climate change, we will need to depend less on private cars and more on sustainable modes of transport in the future, and this is recognised by Council's policy, which promotes less parking. We also need more housing and employment opportunities, and if they cannot be provided in existing brownfield sustainable town centre locations such as this, they will be pushed out to less sustainable greenbelt locations. The proposed ground floor commercial units will add to the vitality and vibrancy of the existing retail offer in Chigwell, and one could be used as a doctor's clinic. I urge you therefore to support the application and vote in favour of your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, and I'd just also like to point out that I'm joined by the applicant and our transport consultant this evening, so if anyone has any questions they'd like to direct towards us, we'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ritvi.
Thank you, Chairman. So I know this was obviously discussed extensively back in July, but having now had a detailed review of the applicant's viability report and also the council's viability report, I really do feel it actually raises more questions than providing answers. And you know, we've heard a lot about the costing, the lack of affordable housing, and you know, the parking provision for this as well. So I think the main point, as has been touched on and discussed and debated at length, is the lack of affordable housing. You know, with any development greater than 11 dwellings, the local plan policy H2 states that it does require 40% of affordable housing on site, and for me this proposal simply doesn't meet that requirement and is therefore in breach of the local plan. And I'll follow that up for a question for the planning officer, Mr. Courtney, about what I suppose, steps have been taken, or what is the planning officer's view on this application and the fact that it does not meet the requirements of policy H2, question one. And it's obviously great to have BPS and the council's independent viability assessor on the call. So question for BPS is, I was looking through, and again, I've studied this in detail. I've reviewed all 40 pages of the BPS report and 92 pages of the viability report from the applicant. So on page 24 of the BPS report, in point 4.8, it talks about the difference in cost and the difference between a cost estimate and the assessment of cost using the BCIS formula. So perhaps if we could just get a little bit of clarification on that from the independent assessor first, and then the planning officer to answer the first question, and then I just need to follow up on those 2 points.
I think Elise here from BPS is going to answer.
Elise, can you answer those queries?
Yes, certainly. Can I quickly clarify where in the report's been referenced? Sorry, I missed it when you mentioned the paragraph reference.
So it's on page 24, point 4.8.
Page 24.4. So the cost consultants that we use compare the construction costs proposed by the applicant with the RICS's build cost information service. So these are a national database of costs that are then, there's an indices that's applied to make them more specific to the borough, and they take into account the cost inflations and changes over time. So the cost consultants that we use benchmark the cost plan against this database to affirm whether or not they are reasonable. Does that answer your question?
It does sort of briefly, but it says as part of that point that the difference between costs and the cost estimate and an assessment of costs using the BCIS formula is £4,063,336 or 29.7%, which to me is a hugely alarming figure. And then I know there is sort of a further breakdown in the appendices of exactly what the various costings are. So, I mean, is it right in thinking, am I right in thinking that the actual difference between the costs as part of the applicant's formula and the BCIS formula is 4 million odd?
So I must confess that when it comes to QS calculations, to some extent I rely on the QS. However, I am aware that the recommended costs in the cost consultant report were the costs that we ended up adopting. So we ended up adopting whatever lower cost they used. We then had a period between the February report and the April addendum report where the applicant's cost consultants and our cost consultants, they met and they discussed the specification of the units that were being proposed. And there was a sort of middle ground position wherein our cost consultant understood that a higher specification had been proposed than was first appreciated. And that was therefore the cost we then moved forward with.
Thank you. And just with that in mind, looking through the council's independent viability report, it does say on page 13 that it infers a cost plan reflects a premium development specification and that the development has been undervalued considering its own high specification. So, you know, for me, it's quite clear from all of the submissions that the developer is likely overinflated their costings and quite intentionally undervalued the sale price per dwelling to dodge, you know, the contribution for affordable housing and also maximise profitability. And, you know, I think when we're making a decision on such a significant number of new flats, 35 flats, in an area which is already extremely congested, in an area which is already, you know, suffering from a lot of congestion, specifically around the busiest times of the day. I mean, I know Brook Parade really, really well, and, you know, trying to get a car through there after school or, you know, early mornings when the hair salon is booked up with appointments, the barber shop is booked up with appointments, proves really, really challenging. So, you know, those are two specific points which make me feel quite uneasy with this application. The point that I raised to the planning officer earlier about the requirement of policy H2 not being met, just to follow up with that, if, for example, you know, and again, not to kind of preempt anything, but if, for example, the application is refused today and it does go to appeal, what would be sort of tentatively the legal cost that the council could be looking at as part of any kind of, you know, legal challenge or appeals process?
I'm afraid I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
It's to the planning. And I appreciate it is difficult, but in similar sorts of cases or in similar sorts of proposals.
In all honesty, I don't think I can answer that either. It would depend on, obviously, how much the appeal costs, if there's a cost award, if there's a full award of costs, partial award of costs, how much you know, the applicants or then would then be appellants have spent. Yeah, it's an unanswerable question. It would potentially be quite a large sum of money, but yeah, I don't know why. And you did ask initially the question about obviously it being contrary to policy and how officers obviously feel about that. I mean, obviously the policy does allow for this exact situation. You know, if it is put forward that the application isn't viable or you know, cannot provide the affordable housing on site, then obviously there are means of submitting viability appraisals. Obviously we have experts such as BPS. Obviously we seek comments and input from our housing colleagues regarding the affordable housing and what would be acceptable. You know, we take all of these expert opinions into account to reach our conclusions. Obviously our assessors and housing officers accept what's being put forward to us. I will remind members that there was some negotiation, and I believe the viability appraisal actually says that 85,000, if I remember rightly, is what is the money available, and obviously there was a negotiation to obtain 600,000, which is obviously quite a significant increase, and that was as a result of some negotiations between planning officers, housing officers, and the applicants. So we do try our best to get as much as we possibly can out of these schemes, but we do have to work within the limits of our expert advice, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councillor Sangha.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is before us today, now that we've had the viability assessment report presented to us, and my ward colleague here, Councillor Rizvi, has quite clearly highlighted some points in that report that needs perhaps some clarification. My first question really is to the officer that's put this together, is that can you give us a concrete reassurance that that report that you've done cannot be challenged, and that you stand corrected with the fact that the affordable housing is not required in this particular application? And I'll come back if I may, please, Chairman.
Sorry, I think that was directed towards BPS, I believe. Yep. So if that's Elise.
Thanks, sorry, I heard officer mentioned and I wasn't sure. Yes, so we have looked over the costs and values and our addendum report was April 2021, and I can confirm that as of April 2021, the scheme was in deficit, and that the developer was subsequently making below the the National Planning Policy Guidance's minimum allowance for developers' profit.
Want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you for that. My other question really relates to, I think there's a bit of a conflict of information. The objector raised that the urban design officer wasn't happy or wasn't supported. Could we just have clarification on that, please? And if I can come back again, thank you.
Yeah, again, we have Krishma here, who's Krishma Shah, who's the urban design officer. So,
Krishma, can you give us your views, please?
Of course. Evening. Thank you. As it said in my report, all of the issues that I had previously have been worked through except for one. So in my opinion, that one issue, which is the building line of the top setback story and how far forward that is the reason that I have had to tick that I do not support this proposal. But obviously my comments do outline all the positive aspects of the proposals. There are certainly quite a few aspects that we've worked through with the applicants within the last 6 months or so. My report obviously is purely on the urban design aspects, and then that has been provided to the case officers to take a balanced view of that. Is that sufficient? Or,
yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Quickly, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. I'm sorry if I could actually have raised all these in one go, but I'm trying to do it in bite-sized chunks so that people understand where we're going with this. This site is a brownfield site, so a development of some description will happen on that site. I'm not very happy, the fact, like my colleague said, the parking situation, etc. But there will be a development site there of some description. I'm not happy the fact that we have no affordable housing, but our officer, or the BPS officer, has actually said that it's solid concrete, that she stands corrected with her report. Where does that leave us? Well, every single box under the National Planning Policy Framework is being ticked. And quite rightly, my colleague here has highlighted about the appeal. I don't think we should be making a decision based on whether appeal is going to go in or not. It should be based on the merits of the application that's in front of us. And quite honestly, it seems to be ticking every single box, unless Mr. Courtney would like to highlight there's any issues or any particular areas he's not happy with. But I'm happy to listen to the debate from other members. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Once again, we have a development that's offering Section 106 that will not be given to Chigwell for the residents. We've already said that there's lack of parking around the area as it is. There's congestion there. If you're going to have some more units there, so commercial units, a couple of years ago we had a couple of commercial units that were on the high roads just adjacent to on the side of the station. They weren't filled. Nobody was coming forward to fill those commercial units. So I'm also worried that that's going to be the same again, especially after COVID. And another applicant came forward to us, and it was actually a private GP that we had to actually fill it so that people were actually, we were walking around that area. Otherwise, it was being left empty. So I have concerns about that. Again, that's £600,000. You're saying libraries, education. Well, again, that would be great if it was for Chigwell, please. If we're going to allow to have this in Chigwell, then please give us something back for our residents. We have a library there. We have, other places around the area which maybe that we could actually increase a car park. We have Victory Hall. Maybe there was money that could actually been given to that for us, for our residents. I'm also concerned about the overinflated costs, the bathroom, the doors of the actual of these flats. And again, I'd like to just go over what Councillor Risby said about maybe dodging the S106 contributions, because that seems what's been going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pond, please.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Well, I think we might have gone a bit off the salient facts here, because we shouldn't, I think, get too involved in the exact level of the contribution. I would say that the word that occurred to me when the figure was mentioned was peanuts, because this is a very large development. It's a large development which will push down a huge wall of concrete and glass right opposite Chigwell Station. And I remember when we discussed this in July, I had a lively discussion with Councillor Sunger and Councillor Lyon about whether this was an appropriate sort of development in Chigwell. They were adumbrating the fact that Chigwell was a village. I was saying, well, it's not really a village, but it is a suburban development, low rise. And to have this concrete, glass, brick, massive masonry opposite the entrance to Chigwell, I just think is inappropriate. My view is we shouldn't necessarily be arguing about the exact level of the affordable housing contribution, important though that is. My view is that we should reject this application on the basis of being completely inappropriate to its setting.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, on that point, I did ask at the last meeting when this was discussed that I wanted to see more of the actual impact on the street scene, in particular Brook Parade. It just shows, on the drawings we got, the same as last time, it just shows the corner building of Brook Parade. So I think we need to see the impact of this building on a much wider scale than what's been presented, and that's what I asked for last time.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Heap.
Just to be a bit maverick, I think they've listened to some of the concerns last time, and I praise them for changing some of the aspects, particularly losing the boilers. I'm still undecided.
Councillor Murray, did you put up your hand? No, you didn't. Well, we've finished our discussion. I think we go to the vote on this application. I think we're going to go to the vote now.
The recommendation is to grant permission subject to the legal agreement. Members in for?
You might have to do it one by one, I think, don't you?
Members for to grant the application? No. Sorry, I apologise. Nobody's in favour. Against? That's 20. Abstentions? Oh. That's not right. It's 3.
There's definitely 3 that abstained.
Yeah. 18. That's 18 against and 3 abstentions. So that motion has failed. There needs to be a motion now for refusal.
So can we have a proposer and a seconder to refuse this application?
I propose to refuse.
Can we have a seconder? That's Councillor Barlow. You put the motion forward for refusal? Yes. Can we have a seconder? Sorry?
We actually need a motion. So,
Councillor Patel.
Chairman, I can't hear anyone coming forward with a motion for refusal, so I'll give it a stab and someone can help me with that. So, touching on Councillor Pond's point regarding this development being out of character within its setting, I think that the design, the bulk of the development is also out of keeping with its locality. There's concerns regarding the car parking or the parking provision on the site. Missed anything else? Costing. And just in terms of the costings, can we get some clarification that if we bring this forward as a grounds for refusal, obviously we've sought independent advice on that. Where would we stand on that?
I would strongly recommend that we don't refuse it on affordable housing or lack of affordable housing. The inspector's going to look at exactly the same as what our independent assessors have looked at. They're going to ask for our opinions on it, which will be what BPS have provided. I'm not entirely... I I personally wouldn't go for that myself, but obviously it is ultimately down to members. But yeah, certainly it would not be my recommendation to refuse on lack of affordable housing.
Could you put in overdevelopment, perhaps?
Overdevelopment. We could put it in overdevelopment, according to what some of the members have mentioned. Councillor
Madam
Pond.
Chairman, I'd add the overbearing nature of the top floor and the incongruousness of this design with the rest of Chigwell. I think that's, I didn't quite hear what Councillor Patel said, but I think it's much the same. So I would support that motion.
So the motion has been put forward, and so can we, yes, can we agree?
Members in favour of refusal under those reasons? Sorry, yeah, sorry, you do need a seconder. So, sorry, Councillor Barlow was the proposer, and is it Councillor Patel as seconder?
Councillor Risby. Come on, your award, Councillor.
Right. Okay, seconder, Councillor Risley.
Okay, sorry, apologies. We just take that vote, which is for refusal. So that's 1, 6, 7, 19. And against? None, and abstentions? It's 2. Therefore, it's been refused.
That application has been refused. Do we have a way forward? Way forward? Graham Courtney? No, we don't need a way forward. No.
If they want to put a way forward, they don't have to. So
Yeah.
if no one's
So no,
proposed it,
we're not. None of the members are suggesting a way forward. Councillor.
Could I just add the way forward that potentially, though we're not rejecting it on the reasons of the affordable housing, that perhaps the council could look at it again? It would be a nice way forward. I don't think anyone here is happy about it.
Okay, so can we say that the way forward is that officers will look at this application with all the entities that have been raised this evening and come back?
I butted in. I think we ought to say that the height of and prominence of the top story be reduced and the facade be varied to make a much less monolithic entry to Chigwell.
Sorry, just quickly to come in. So that's absolutely fine. Councillor Owen, I would suggest that's not really a way forward, but certainly it's something that we can note and look into. But I don't think we would want to put that in the minutes as a way forward. But yeah. Well, we can certainly put it in the minutes. I'm just not convinced it's a way forward as such. But we can certainly, yeah, we can note that down and
Thank you for that.
I don't feel enough has been done. Genuinely, I don't. I mean, it's gone from 600,000 to 3 units. There's definitely more on the table here, and I think the council aren't doing enough.
So we need to look at that. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think because of the overinflated costs as well of all the materials of this build, I think if we can just relook at all of that. And I agree with Councillor Owen that there's more to get out of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. That's been noted. And now we're going on to our next application of the evening, EFP/1306/21, 7 Brooklyn Avenue, Loughton, IG10 1BL.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the erection of a new detached dwelling in the side garden of number 7 Brooklyn Avenue. It is recommended for approval subject to conditions and a legal agreement and is before members due to an objection from the Town Council and a number of neighbouring residents. The application site, as I said, is the side garden of the existing dwelling, and it's situated at the junction of Brooklyn Avenue and Priory Road. The proposal would provide an additional dwelling that continues the built frontage along Priory Road, just here. The existing dwelling is what's shown here. It's a 3-bedroom semi-detached house, and the proposed dwelling would be a 3-bedroom detached house. So just clarity, this is the existing house here, and this is the new house, ground floor and first floor. The proposal would follow the existing pattern of development and be of a design that would not be out of keeping with the area. This is the rear elevation. The new dwelling would be slightly smaller in footprint due to the more constrained site and is considered to have a fairly neutral impact on the street scene and wider area. These are the various elevations. So given the location and siting of the property, there would not be any loss of amenity to neighbours. So whilst located within the garden area, it would be difficult to class this proposal as backland development, given the orientation of the site. The proposal will make more efficient use of the site and would assist in the council meeting its 5-year land supply for housing, albeit in a small way. So there's some bird's eye views of the site. So the dwelling would go in here. The proposal would meet the national described space standards in terms of internal space. The garden area for the new dwelling would be 124 square metres and would be more constrained than other nearby plots. However, it is considered to be functional and usable. The donor property would retain 100 square metres of amenity space. This is the front of the site as existing. This is the rear of the site. The existing parking area that can be seen here would be, which is for the donor property, would be relocated to the front, which would be, just flip back, which would be similar to other properties within the road. This is the junction as it is at the moment. So on balance, the proposal is considered to be acceptable since, whilst it is constrained, it does provide adequate internal and external space. And although of no strong architectural character, the development would have a fairly neutral impact on the street scene. Therefore, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have a speaker, Rebecca Lowe, on this application.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. The site is a corner plot where Priory Road and Brooklyn Avenue meet, parallel to the high street and full of exciting shops, restaurants and transport connections, resulting in a truly sustainable location as required by national and local policy. The applicants do not own a car and have enjoyed the ease of movement to the high street and walks in the forest beyond, which is why they wish to remain in this location. Purchase of the current house has been made possible by borrowing from friends and loved ones, as this area is unaffordable for most young working families. The new dwelling will be a self-build, providing an affordable route to property ownership in this fantastic area. The existing house and garden present poorly to the surrounding streets, with tired fences and overgrown trees spilling over onto the pavements that surround it. Since occupation, the young family have begun to improve both the house and the garden and will continue this endeavour with the proposed development. Pre-application advice has informed the revised design, which is before you today. The surrounding properties are a mixture of styles and sizes, with the proposer seeking to combine these in a sympathetic way. Some minor alterations are proposed to the existing house to help it present correctly on the street. At present, the house is accessed from Brooklyn Avenue, whereas the attached house and neighbouring properties front Priory Road, and this reads very awkwardly in the street. The new driveways fronting Priory Road will have a better sense of space and openness, allowing the legibility of street to be easily navigated by both residents using pavements and the more pleasing street scene than at present. 2 EV charging points will be installed, one for the existing and one for the proposed dwelling, helping to further protect the Epping Forest SAC. The family are keen to explore other green technologies, including heat recovery and solar panels where possible. No trees on the site are protected, and the proposal seeks to retain as many trees as feasible to preserve the visual amenity and privacy. Restorative pruning of the existing trees will improve the condition and lifespan. Trees being felled are in poor condition or unsuitable species for this garden. 4 native replacement trees are proposed, which are suitable for their locations and provide year-round interest. The applicants are happy to agree the new tree species with neighbours if alternatives are preferred. The proposed garden sizes reflect neighbourhood development patterns as required by local policy. Design and access statement shows the amenity spaces for both properties will be greater than the neighbouring average, which is superior to the ideal size of 100 metres squared quoted in the Essex Design Guide. The proposed dwelling is a 3-bedroom detached L-shaped house. Overlooking of neighbouring properties will not occur due to the separation distances between buildings, with only the front elevations being visible, which are considered public areas. The proposal's private amenity spaces will not be overlooked, as houses to the side and rear are single-storey and set lower down due to the changing ground levels. The retained mature tree line will help to enclose and screen the site accordingly. Flood risk concerns have been raised, however the proposal site is not in a flood risk zone. The family do not want to generate additional surface water runoff and will install permeable surfaces. They are happy to look at attenuation tanks under driveways if the councillors feel that this is of benefit. On behalf of my clients, I'd like to take the opportunity to say they are hopeful the proposed dwelling can be agreed this evening, as they look forward to bringing up their son in this great town. To this end, they hope they can work with neighbours on any items raised to find an agreeable route forward so they may enjoy a long and happy future here. Thank you.
Thank you. Spot on. 3 minutes. Thank you. Members. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'll address the design of the house. It's a thoughtful design, and I'm glad they've taken into account climate change and have incorporated some of the things that will mitigate those. The design does fit in with the design of houses in the road, and I'm sure that it will look very attractive if it is able to be built. I'm going to move on now to the impact of the street scene for the residents of Priory Road. I can only speculate whether they would prefer a view of the garden with trees or a view of 4 parking spaces in front of them, but I should not imagine that that was an improvement to the view for the residents of Priory Road. I would also like to mention the loss of the important trees in the garden. There are 2 trees in particular that I think would be hard to replace, the yew and the horse chestnut tree. And I think these would be important trees in the area, and the area would suffer for the loss of them. I won't comment on the impact on the Epping Forest SAC, because I'm sure lots of other councillors would like to make their comments and would be eager to comment on that. But I would just like to point out that this house is less than 5-minute walk from, less than 10 minutes walk from Epping Forest. So it is extremely close to the forest, and an extra house will have an impact on the forest. Finally, the loss of the garden, there is versus the financial benefit to the host house. There will be a financial benefit, obviously, to the host house, the owners of the host house, but the loss of the garden would be an invaluable to wildlife, the birds, the insects, and of course the humans who live in the community close to the house. And I shall not be supporting this application.
Councillor Brooks.
as many of you would know, I never claimed that planning was my specialist interest, but I have sat in this committee for 4 years. I am puzzled because we've turned down many similar applications in gardens, in my wood in Roding and not far from where I live in Forest over the last 4 years. And I just wonder if the officer could explain what makes this particularly special. I am very concerned about the loss of the garden. We all know the value because of climate change, but I'm just concerned as to what makes this one special and why you would like us to pass it.
Thank you, Councillor. In all honesty, with planning, it's not so much about what makes it special. It's more about why would it be refused. I mean, we are now urged to be positive and proactive. Obviously, make more efficient use of land. I did mention that it's obviously there are now restrictions, or restrictions is a slightly too tough a word really, but there's kind of guidance about backland development and garden grabbing and things like that. But as I say, in this instance, I think it would be hard to say this is backland development. You could argue garden grabbing, I guess, but certainly backland development is usually, when you have the houses in a back garden and they're not in keeping with the built frontage of the street and things like that. I think I obviously don't know which cases you're talking about. I know we had a case actually at the last South Committee, which certainly was more of a backland development that we did refuse. I don't think this is can be compared to that. But I think it's more about why would we refuse this? Obviously, if there are reasons to refuse it, I mean, on balance, officers consider that it meets the requirements, it meets the GIA, the internal areas for the Nationally Described Space Standards. It provides adequate garden space, albeit slightly constrained. It provides parking. It aligns with the street scene. There was mention about the loss of the trees, but obviously our landscape officer has been consulted and raised no objections. So really, it's more about we don't see there's a reason to refuse permission on this rather than it being particularly special. So that's kind of why our recommendation is there, but obviously it is down to yourselves to make the decision, as you well know.
Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm also a ward councillor here, and no pun intended, I'm a bit on the fence on this one. And I'm leaning, unfortunately, against, because it's a difficult one to explain, but Loughton gradually is becoming concreted over, which is a very sad thing to say. And particularly in this area, in my tenure as a councillor, we've seen houses split in two. We've seen a single house come down and two very small houses built in this road. We're losing lots and lots of greenery, and it's becoming, not just this particular application, but more and more, the lack of greening, the loss of trees. Loughton is very dependent on its trees. And it's just unfortunate. This one, I know it's a garden, I know it's a side garden, so it's not really what the officer is saying, garden grabbing, it's not a house in the back garden, but the same applies. You've got another house that's very close to the host house. Obviously the neighbour's not going to object because it's the applicant, but the legacy is another house crammed in an over small plot and loss of trees, and everyone else in the road suffers. And I think we just have to take that into account. It's just a development that doesn't need to happen, that upsets all of the neighbours for the gain of the individual, who will be relatively, in time, a transient individual, and we will just end up with a concrete town. It's not what we're looking for.
Councillor Jennings. Councillor Pond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm the County Councillor for Loughton Central and have been for over 15 years. And I note the comment from Essex Highways that they have no objection to this development. However, that was dated some months ago, and since then there has been a further issue raised by the Parking Authority, which is the North Essex Parking Partnership, who have announced that they are developing a parking scheme because of parking stress and because of obstruction in this very area where Priory Road meets the High Road and Brooklyn. So I think the report from Essex Highways is out of date and should be disregarded. Like my colleagues, Councillors Kaufman and Jennings, I am inclined to recommend that this application be refused. I think an able case has been made for why it should be allowed, but I take issue with 2 or 3 things. First of all, I wanted to emphasise the point made by Councillor Jennings. This is within 450 metres of the special area of conservation, and I do not think that individual houses make a great deal of difference on their own, but in combination with other so-called windfall sites, they do. And so I would refuse this because I do not believe the council can be certain that no detriment will occur to the SAC, even with the mitigation strategy for something which is close to the SAC. So I would add that. Garden grabbing is a bit of a press phrase, but I agree entirely with Councillor Kaufman that what is a pleasant area of greenery, if somewhat overgrown, will be lost to bricks and mortar. And we should not be looking to cram cramped development into every little green space. This is not backland development, as the officer correctly says. It's extending a row of houses, but it is very cramped. It just meets the standards. But that is not what houses in Loughton do. It is out of character, in my view, with the older development to which it is adjacent. And I would also talk about flooding concerns, because the agent referred to attenuation tanks, and though that might mitigate the problem, this area is adjacent to a very long culvert which takes the Loughton Brook from behind the end of Clifton Road, under the High Road, and comes out at the opposite side of Brooklyn. Therefore, I think worries about surcharge of rainwater, especially in heavy rain, are valid ones, and I think that without attenuation tanks, this is just not a viable development. The last thing I would say is I'm not very happy with page 69 of the agenda. A number of neighbours consulted 13 responses received, and then multiple objections. We might, I think, have rather more detail, because people in different places in relation to this this development would have different views. I would prefer much more space given to the developments, which are not even on the website, than is available to you at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Robert Jennings.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm always minded in instances like this to think, why didn't the original developer put a house there? I mean, after all, developers in those days are much the same as developers today, and they want to get every possible property in to maximise their profit, which is perfectly understandable and quite right in many instances. But I think basically the fact that this house is smaller, albeit only slightly, does answer that question. The original developer didn't put a house in there because it doesn't look right. It's as simple as that. If you take away the greenery of this side garden and put a house there, it would look like a bunion, basically. It would just look out of place. Although every effort, I think, has been made to try and blend it in by mirroring the existing design features, I think it's going to look very, very awkward in the street scene. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. I missed the landscape plan during the presentation, because there's comments being made about the loss of the trees on site. Can I just double check, are they protected trees? So,
no, the trees aren't protected. There are, I don't have the exact number here. I can show you the plans if you'd like. There are some existing trees. Obviously, some of those will be removed. Some of them will be retained. Hang on 2 seconds. My apologies. Let me share this. So this is the proposed scheme, and so this is how it is at the moment. So there obviously are a number of trees and a lot of vegetation on that site, and then yes, some obviously quite a lot of that will be lost. Some will be retained. None of them are protected, and as I say, we did consult with the Tree and Landscape Officer, which some of you may know are very tough officers in this district. They are very vigilant about keeping as many trees as they possibly can, but actually they haven't raised any objections subject to tree protection and retention of these trees. Yeah. Right.
So just looking at the plans, the most significant trees that are there on the site will be retained from looking from one from the existing image to the proposed image. Or are they new trees that are going to be planted?
No, I believe they are existing trees that would be retained. There is a condition, as I say, suggested about tree protection measures to ensure that they are protected.
Just another point to make regarding the argument around the impact on the SAC. I mean, the report states that obviously that there's windfall allowance, and the development of this nature would fall within that windfall allowance amount. So I think that the argument there, where one-off development is going to impact on the SAC, I think has been responded to in the body of the report. I actually quite like the proposal. I mean, I think I was against the last scheme that we've viewed at a previous meeting, but every application has to be taken on its own merits and setting, and I think this application is actually okay for where it is.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley, please.
Yeah, I don't think we got a clear illustration of the street scene from Priory Road. Looking at that plan view, I'm a bit concerned about a vast expanse of parking places and not enough soft landscaping, which clearly will be detrimental to the street scene in my view. I welcome the fact that the 2 parking spaces at the rear of the host property would, as I understand it, become garden, because that currently looks quite ugly as it is, I think, but it would be unfortunate if that ugliness is transferred to the front of these properties. And I think the street scene is very important, and it doesn't appear to show it there from what I can see, because you've got fences around it. It's again, as I said in the one in Chigwell, we need to see more of the street scene, because as councillors we are voting for something which, or not, that's going to be visible for many years to come. So the street scene is a very important issue, and I think we ought to perhaps focus on that a bit more in future meetings.
Right, thank you. Councillor Owen.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of with Councillor Patel on this one. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of building on gardens, but if we are going to do it anywhere, it makes the most sense to be here, because it is a kind of, it's got the corner, you can get in and out. The trees are still going to retain. It looks nice, the green credentials for it. So I'm really on the fence with this one, to be honest.
Thank you. I think we don't normally do this, but I know you've had your hand up.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify about the trees. So the horse chestnut tree is recommended for removal in the current situation because the species is too large and too close to the existing dwelling, so that would occur regardless. The smaller trees that you can see on that drawing there are actually new trees that are proposed, which are suitable for their location. They're actually Juneberries, so I just wanted to clarify on that point.
Okay, thank you. So if you have no more questions, we can can go to a vote, formal vote.
Recommendation is to grant permission subject to legal agreement. Members in for? Five. Against? Eight. And abstentions? 6. So that's failed. So
Madam Chairman, I'd like to move that the application be refused, and I do so rather regretfully. But I think the reasons we should state are first that the local planning authority cannot be certain that the special area of conservation will not be harmed by this with other similar applications in combination in contravention of the Habitats Regulation 2017 and the Holohan judgment. And this proposed site is less than 500 metres from the SAC. Secondly, it is the appropriation of an area of garden and greenery which will have a deleterious effect on the immediate area. Secondly, because of comments recently received from the North Essex Parking Partnership, further attention needs to be given to exits and entrances and the effect on any proposed parking controls at this location. And lastly, the street scene which would result from this development would not enhance the area and would detract from the general ambience of it.
So, Councillor Patel.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Chairman, can I get clarification from the planning officer on the first grounds for refusal? Because on that basis, we're essentially saying that no development is going to be allowed.
We have come back several times on this matter. Previously, I think we came back seeking a legal opinion, from what I understand, to a previous DDMC meeting on this matter. Obviously, the APMS does make it clear on what the mitigation requirements are, and the advice that we've been given is that that is suitable mitigation. The proximity to the forest isn't a determining factor, doesn't mean that we require any further mitigation. We have come back on that before, saying that obviously we have had some recent refusals on very similar grounds. None of those have yet been tested on appeal, so we're waiting to see what the inspector makes of those. But yeah, our advice and certainly the legal advice we've been given is that because we have the APMS, if the applicants are willing to provide the mitigations as laid out in the APMS, then that is sufficient to address the harm to the SAC.
I don't accept that point, and that's why I gave it as one of the reasons for a possible refusal. If any of my colleagues would care
anyone like to second that, Councillor Pons, grounds for refusal? Yes, so that's seconded, and then can we go to the vote on that?
So for refusal under Councillor Pons, who's for that? Does that make sense? For refusal? In favour? Yes, sorry.
In favour of refusal.
9 Chairman. And who's in favour? Against? Sorry, apologies.
Can't go twice.
This is against, sorry, against, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and abstentions. That's 5, Chairman. Therefore, it's been refused. It's been refused.
So, can we have a way forward? Or is it just a downright refusal? Way forward.
Anybody want to suggest a way forward?
Councillor Wixley.
Well, notwithstanding the complexity of the reasons for refusal, I might be a little bit persuaded if the street scene and some soft landscaping could be added. But that is quite a big factor for me, which I think was one of the last reasons in the reasons to refuse. But obviously there are other factors as well.
I don't think that's... Is that the big grounds for...
Members don't have to put a way forward, don't have to suggest a way forward. It is completely up to members. If they don't want to suggest a way forward, then that's fine. I've made a note of what Councillor Wixley said, but no, there's no reason to put a way forward.
Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate Councillor Pond has left at the crucial moment, because he probably he must have been desperate, but I think he could have been quite eloquent in suggesting the way forward, but I don't know if we can wait until he comes back. I've got no idea how long it'll be.
So that application's been refused. Next. Andrew, sorry, we didn't see you.
Thank you, Chair. I think whilst it's always appreciated when members give a way forward, we should just remember that I think is what was said at least twice tonight, is that each application is decided on its own merit. So, I'm not sure that slowly picking off reasons for refusal will eventually end in a favourable recommendation, or indeed a group of members agreeing a planning permission. So yes, fine if members want to say something about the way forward, but I do think we just need to be careful to judge each application on its own merits. So if a subsequent application comes in, we will have to look at it in terms of what is proposed then, not in terms of necessarily what members have stated as a possible way forward.
Thank you. So, planning application EFP/2243/2146 Russell Road, Buckhurst Hill, IG9 5QE.
Thank you, Chairman. So the final application tonight is for the retention of a two-storey side extension, retention and alteration of the rear box dormer, and the provision of a rear extension at number 46 Russell Road. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions, and is in front of members tonight since it has been called in by Councillor Heap. Members may recall this site as previous applications have been presented to committee, most recently for the retention of the side extension and the retention and alteration of the box dormer, which was granted consent in April 2021. Whilst it is appropriate for this application to cover all extensions, including those previously granted consent, the presentation will focus on the rear extension only, since consent has been given for the other works. So really the main issue we're looking at here is the rear extension. So there's a complex history to this site, which involves unlawful additions and enforcement action. The plan here shows what is stated to be the previous situation on the site. Yep. What is currently partially built and subject to an enforcement notice, and the latest proposal. The difference can be seen in that the proposal in front of us today is for a 4 metre lower ground and 3 metre ground floor extension, as opposed to the 6 metre and 5 metre unlawful structure that's currently on site, which is this one in the middle. This shows the previous front extension and what is being proposed, and has already been approved earlier this year. The only alteration here is to the rear, whereby the bulk of the rear extension has been reduced, although it's not wonderfully clear from the rear elevations, unfortunately. So the reduction in depth, which can be seen here, is similar to that which was allowed at number 44 Russell Road. Here we go. It's a good plan showing the application site with the neighbour at 44, which has got planning permission for this extension. So the previous concerns on this site were regarding a combined impact from the substantial side extension, the rear extension and the loft extensions, which led to previous appeal being dismissed. Officers have worked with the applicant to enable a solution to be found to this long-running situation. Whilst the combined extensions are still fairly significant, it is considered that on balance, the reduction of the rear extension combined with the reduction to the rear box dormer would be sufficient to overcome the previous concerns. This is a view of the site prior to any of the unlawful works taking place, which is this one here. This is the front of the property. I think this is a slightly older photograph. I think things have moved on slightly since then, but it does show the side extension that has been approved previously. This shows the previous uncompleted unlawful extension to the rear, which is the subject of an enforcement notice. This shows the current relationship with the neighbour at number 48 Russell Road. And this one shows the relationship with the neighbour at number 44 at the top here. And also some views towards the dwellings to the rear on Westbury Road. Unlike previous applications, there's very little objection to this proposal. And given the reduction in the depth and the bulk of the rear extension, combined with the previously approved reduction in the box dormer, it is considered now that the application is acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions. Back to you, members.
We have a speaker, Mr. Paul Halama. Have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Paul Halama. I am the homeowner of number 46 Russell Road and the applicant for the proposals before you. I will first, though, touch on the matter, if I may, that I think is pertinent. Most of you will be aware there is an existing building which has been the subject of much speculation, but it should be known the catalyst for the build was to contend with the permission that was unexpectedly granted next door to me, which was for the demolition of a bungalow to be replaced by a block of flats. Having only just started work on my 2015 approved plans, I naturally sought advice on how I might contend with the impact the flats would have onto the rear of my property. I was told the dimensions that would be acceptable, and I submitted the plans prescribed by the planning officer, thinking all was well. There is not the time for the whys and wherefores of how we got to where we are. Suffice to say, I wouldn't wish the last 3 years on anyone, but there are councillors who can vouch for the strenuous efforts I have made during that time to resolve the matter. Moving now to the proposal before you, it is a revision of the side roof extension that was approved in April this year. The addition is a modest rear extension with a 3-metre deep ground floor, almost identical to the 2015 approval, and below is the 4-metre lower ground floor. The extension mirrors the profile of the plans granted last year to the adjoining semi, so will have no detrimental impact on my immediate neighbour to the east at number 44. In fact, he has supported the application and wishes to utilise the east flank wall for his own extension. My neighbour to the west at number 48 is currently a bungalow, and I have been led to believe that this is now likely to remain so. As you will have seen, the bungalow extends some 6 metres beyond the rear of my house, and because of the topography is that much higher, therefore the roof of my proposed rear extension is below the eaves of the existing bungalow. So again, no impact in any respect to number 48 to the west. Given the permission to one side of my property and the bungalow to the other, the extension is as proposed, causes no harm to my immediate or more distant neighbours. The site is screened by mature trees and bushes, so it's largely obscured from neighbours to the east in Westbury Road and will be entirely concealed from neighbours at the rear of Russell Road. It will not be visible from the street in any direction. The proposals have been designed to complement the context of the site and remove any possible concerns. It has the support of the Parish Council and the Planning Department and is said to have satisfied the concerns of the Planning Inspectorate as well. Ironically, it is now required in order to combat the tulling effect caused by my neighbour's approved extension. So I'd like to think now that the councillors will be able to fully support my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Ward members, would you like to speak?
Chairman, I would, but I know that Councillor Heath has called the application in, so you sure? Thank you. Just to clarify a point that Mr. Hallam has made, that the development at 48, which is was the proposed flats, was obviously judged on its own merits at that time, and that development was based on its setting in relation to his property, and it was approved by committee. This application, although I mean I'm familiar with the history of the application, but from my perspective, it now marries and ties in with its neighbouring property, its neighbouring semi-detached property at 44, and on that basis, I will be supporting this application.
Thank you. Councillor Heath.
Thank you. Yes, just to clarify a couple of things. The Parish Council were completely supportive. It's correctly recorded as an objection because that's the correct procedure, but everybody there did approve of it. And the other thing was the proposed development of 3 flats at 48. During the presentation that members will have heard, some of them still here, the officer at the time did say that it was going to have no impact on 46 because he had a rear extension already given permission, which may or may not have been the case at the time, or wasn't as big as it then became. So it should be approved, I think.
Right. Thank you. Any other members like to comment? Councillor?
Just a quick one, because in here it says number 38 objected for loss of light. Where is number 38 on the map?
Oh. Apologies, let me pull up the map. Sorry, I was going to give you a very quick answer then, and then realised that I was thinking number 48, which obviously is not the case. Let's have a look. I'm not actually 100% certain where 38 is. Let me pull up the... Yeah, it is. So it's yeah. So let me just pull up the plan just so you can see. So it looks like this one here, just not quite on the corner, just one in from the corner, is. Oh, is it? Okay. Well, we all know ordnance survey plans aren't always 100% accurate. So it's certainly towards that junction. That's the sort of distance we're talking.
No, 36 is the one on the corner, and 38 is the next one to it. But just make the point that 44 has the identical profile extension as myself, or approved. So, you know, any effect that's created would be the same for 44. But it's too far away to cause a problem, I would have said.
Thank you. Can we carry on?
No, that was it. Just going to point that out. The only other thing I did want to just clarify is that technically 48 doesn't have a permission. There was a resolution to grant previously at committee, but obviously due to all the issues around the SAC, it was held in abeyance. It was going to come back to a DDMC and got postponed, and I'm not entirely certain it's come back. I can't actually remember if it did end up coming back to a DDMC or not, but no, it didn't actually get permission, but there was a resolution. Just a point of clarity there.
Any other questions? Well, if there's no questions, I think we could go to a formal vote on this. Thank you.
The recommended decision is to grant permission with conditions. All in favour? There's 16, Chairman. Against? And abstentions? Yourself? Yep. 2.
No. So that application has been agreed. And that's our last application. I'd like to thank everyone very, very much for your input and we call this meeting to its end at 9:20. Good night, everyone. Have a good journey home.